Hello, Sanctum SuperCoach fans. The masses of you still with us as we head into round, don't even know, 19. Who knows? The season's dragging on. But the Carlton supporter, Dan, how are you, mate? You must be up and about the last few weeks.
Yeah, we're going along well. Apparently, we've got a chance to break a record that the Cats set in 2008 and something like 1969 or something.
1989, yeah.
Five 1989, 5 wins in a row, above 50 points. If we can do West Coast at the on was it probably Twilight Sunday boring slot or something this week. So hopefully we can do that.
And speaking of West Coast, Mike, I think your team will they can stop that record being equalled. No, or broken, no doubt.
Yeah, I probably don't like our chances, given it was a three-figure deficit at on our home deck. But credit to you, I think I'm going to avoid the game on Saturday, even though I did have tickets. But good luck to you. It's like the less of two evils, Essendon and Carlton. Which one's going to make the eight? Who cares? Hope they both don't.
we haven't got Mick here this week for me to rub it in. I think that's why he avoided this week because my boys towed his up. So I'll give it to him next week when we're on. We'll get stuck in as always. Gary's and Nathan's of our side. Mike, I'll start with you, mate. Who performed well and not so flash for your team?
Yeah, I was plenty of choice for the Nathans this week. I had a number of really poor performers. Pretty hard to go past my Gary if for Tim English. I know nearly everybody's got him, so I won't sort of harp on about him, and he's going to get a mention in a segment a bit later on. But my Nathan this round, after seeing him absolutely towel up Adelaide live the previous week, was the skipper of the Dons, was Zach Merritt. A point of difference. A lot of teams don't have him, and he stunk it up. He was not alone though on Saturday night. I was out to dinner, looked at the score, and it was 7 goals to 0, and I reckon he probably cost me at least a couple of wins because 2 losses within 10 points again. Story of my season. So Zach Merritt, come on, mate, bit of consistency.
Yeah, fair call. Dan, what about you, mate? So we go Gary's and Nathan's for round 18.
So my Gary would have to have been this guy. Look, I know that English is probably it was the top scorer, but I just thought Rory Laird was pretty special with his 151 against the Giants and a losing team. Got to say that. And my Nathan, well, this guy, I mean, everyone hopefully in their weekend's tips, if Gold Coast Suns to get up because if you sack your coach, you'll win the next week. That's not a lie. And this guy came up against the Gold Coast Suns, and that was Jack Sinclair. He did a sweet nothing for about 3 quarters, and then he started to get involved a little bit, but he just looked off the pace, as did the entire St Kilda football team. So, look, I'm hoping that St Kilda play like that in a couple of weeks when we've got them. But yeah, absolutely dismal. So Jack Sinclair was my Nathan for the round.
Dear. Well, my this guy needs to get a look in. I've lost his picture. That'll be right. All good. My Gary was my man Tim English, so you can't go wrong. I just wish I had the VC on him and didn't change that at the last minute. Even my man Josh Kelly lifted. I like to put my Nathan as the background as always though, and this bloke's got a gig before. And that's my man, McRae. I don't know what he's doing. I do. I really blame Bevo, but he was a lock for years. 89 only. I know that's not too bad a score, but given the small size of the SCG and whatever else, he should have been racking them up. I don't know what's going on. So I'm just going to give up on him. He'll be in no one's side next year. That's for sure. Cool. So what we thought we might do for the next 6 weeks is we might look at 3 sides per round per week, and actually look at the SuperCoach MVP for those sides, as well as give you some insight into who's been the surprise good player and who's really stunk it up that you're not a fan of after this year. And then more importantly as well, for those of us which is all of us here, are already looking to 2024 pretty much, who who we think might be good value, one to watch / locks for 2024. So we are going to start this week with Freo, Hawthorn, and the Doggies. We might start with the Hawks, and so I'll throw to Dan, who's going to lead us through chatting about the Hawks in this SuperCoach season.
No problem. So, yeah, look, having a look at the Hawks, as we know, they're languishing at the bottom of the ladder. So, typically speaking, as you all know, teams that get a lot of the ball and get victories on the board get a lot of points. Teams that are down the bottom of the ladder, only a few of their sort of choice players end up scoring anything decent. And that's been the case for Hawthorn, really. If you look through their team, it's pretty slim pickings. But the MVP surely would be and will be finishing as a top 6 defender across the season. That would be James Sicily, averaging 109.2, gets himself rubbed out far too often, which is the only knock on him. He's a bit of a rev head, likes to punch people in the face, which isn't the great move in today's modern game. So maybe if he just wheels that in, he'll be even better. My biggest surprise for this year was a guy that maybe not a massive surprise for everyone. Lots of people did pick him to start the season as a defender, but that would be Will Day. I just think he's pulled out a pretty great season. Yes, he's been a few people's Nathans along the journey. He's pulled out some pretty rubbish scores, but last couple of weeks, 120 and 107. And with my team the way it is, he's going to have to be. I'm going to close my eyes and pretend he's a primo because he's going to stay in the back six. I think he's been pretty good. Biggest letdown. This is a guy that last year was a top 6 rated forward. I don't really know what's happened to him, but Dylan Moore, last year was playing some really good footy. I mean, he's a forward in a really, really crap side, so that doesn't help. He's been sort of running through the midfield, but he's not as often when they've been giving time to John Newcomb, to Will Day, to Warple, to all of those other sort of young mids, and maybe he suffered as a result. Obviously they've given up Jager Amira and Tom Mitchell for nothing, and maybe that sort of helped get the ball out to him as well. So I won't blame him too much, but he's SuperCoach wise was really down. 2024 lock, again, similar sort of thing. I can't really envision that Hawthorn's going to be any great improvement next year. Still think they're going to be duds. So look, the only person I would think about putting a lock on for my 2024 side would be James Sicily. Don't stuff around. He's a top 6 defender. Just get him in. But if Will Days, it's a big if. I'm pretty sure he's just going to be a pure midfielder next year. If he's a defender, roll the dice and pick him up. But that's about it. There's nothing much going on Hawthorn.
Mike, any other Hawthorn things that Dan may have missed?
Yeah, I think you may have just brushed over, but one to perhaps look at next year is Jai Newcomb, and you did mention that. Given that Mitchell and O'Meara are out, he's averaged just shy of 100, hasn't he, this year? And he's only been in the competition 2 or 3 years, sort of coming into his prime. I reckon that average gets over 100 next year, and at only 490. He might be a mid-pricer worth looking at, but I'm with Dan, mate. Steer clear of the poos and wees outside of Sicily, I reckon, for next year.
Yeah, I had a bit of look earlier. Jai Newcomb was 86 average year before, now up to 95. So that's sort of the trend you see in midfielders who often go into that 100 plus. Whether he get to 110 is what you're really looking for. So definitely one to watch, I reckon, for sure. But yes, I agree. It's Sicily and then the rest. So there's our Hawks. Quick look at for next year and the MVP, etc. for this year. We'll look at also the Doggies, Mike. We'll throw to you for the Doggies. That's a bit more of a one we can, a lot more people to talk about, I reckon.
Yeah, it is. I got the good stick end of the stick this week. Perhaps I'll get West Coast or something next week where there won't be much to talk about. But look, I don't want to harp on the Bond, who I reckon is going to pip Dacos for the Brownlow. But I think the MVP this year has to go to Big Tim English. Not only is he the most dominant player in the game, dominant ruckman, he'll be the All-Australian starting ruckman. He's played every game, which is super important for those of you who picked him at the start of the year. He's been one that you set and forget every year. His average is gone. I think it's from 105 last year to 127.6. Whipped out a 215, if you don't mind, at some point this year. So MVP has to go to Timmy English. I think the positive, I know you've had him for a lot of the year, Scott, but if you happen to jump on Liberatore this year, he, I guess, with Dunkley heading up to the Sunshine State, he's really sort of taken that ownership in the midfield. He's sort of around 103, 104 average the last 5 years, and that's jumped to about 117, and still owned by a small amount of super coaches. So if you did get on early, he'd be the positive out of this year, and someone still at only 610,000. Be interesting to see where he's priced at the start of the year to look at into next year.
He is definitely, if I was to give MVP of my side now, he is definitely, he was the bargain get of the year. I got him pretty early. So he's about the only one I've been able to consistently actually have score well. So good call there.
Yeah. Look, I think you've already touched on him being your Nathan, but it's hard to there's probably a few honourable mentions to Bailey Dale, whose second half of the year has been like he's some very, very poor scores. Guy doesn't know how to tackle. So if he doesn't get the ball on his boot, he's going to score bugger all. And also honourable mention to little Brent Daniels. Caleb Daniels. got the wrong small bloke. But it's McRae that has to get the negative for the Bulldogs. I mean, for those of you who've been playing Supercoach for the last 8 years, you would have had him in your side as a lock for the last 8 years. You know, averages in the mid to high 120s, 115 last year, 105.4 this year. And that's a pretty significant drop off from a guy who, you know, was averaging 35 plus possessions a game. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next year. But depending on how he goes pre-season, you know, it may be worth rolling the dice on someone because he probably won't be picked up by that many. I like the stat fit, so stick fat, I should say. Next year's locks, or more, not, you know, locks, English and the Bont, if they're not two of your first picked in your side, as well as Dacos, Dawson, Laird, and these guys.
Don't think they play
really
for the
look
Dogs,
out for. I'm just saying, in addition, Scott. All right, for locks for next year. All right, two guys to look out for. One is Ed Richards, who averaged 60 in 2021, 80 in 2022, 84.3. And if you take out the score where he got 50 odd when he got injured in round 12, I think he is showing signs of improvement. The other one, which may head down to the Bellarine, currently priced at 417, is Bailey Smith, as to where he ends up next year. If he finds a new home and a new lease of life and stays off the gear, he may be one to look at for next year. So that's my assessment of the Dogs.
Pretty big year.
Yeah, that's it. Dan, any extra thoughts on the Doggies?
Well, I think you might remember that the very first Rage Trade of the year was a Mr. Bailey Dale, absolute Carter. So I'm 100% with you there, Mike, who's a big letdown. Then, yeah, look, some of their other players have had really great periods, and then they stink it up. So Adam Treloar came off, against Geelong, round 12, 131, Port Adelaide 122, North 142, Freo 112. Last 2 weeks, 52 and 84. So I don't know. Like you were saying, Bevo's doing some weird stuff around the ball. Some of those guys are playing decent footy, but they're not getting in centre bounces. Some are getting chucked forward. I just honestly think that he just closes his eyes, grabs all the name tags, and then chucks them on the board. And then the only two he rearranges are Tim English, Bont, and maybe Liver into the middle. And then he just lets everything else just fly.
You could, if we were running a Bulldogs podcast and talking about them, I reckon people who run Bulldogs podcasts would just talk about this incessantly. They've got that many blokes who can play in the centre square that this is why they're languishing in mid-table like they have for a little while, because they've got too many blokes the same. But that's not our problem, not Bulldogs supporters. Bevo is the biggest letdown of the season, though, where he's playing some of these blokes Bailey Smith is not far behind. He was like the next big thing, and he's had a pretty ordinary season, but probably played out of position too. Definitely watch if he ends up at Geelong, they'll play him where he should play. And I just went back to my side from round one just to see how many players I had from some of these sides. A lot of people had Josh Bruce to start the season, and you thought, oh yeah, they put him into defence. And is he playing? Not playing. So another letdown for us, and that was one we had to trade out pretty quickly. But I think Mike, you summed up the Bulldogs pretty well. And yes, a couple of Bulldogs as locks for 2024. We're going to end up, we should keep a track. I'll keep track of the locks as we do this, and we'll end up with 25 locks. And that's pretty easy to pick the side next year. And the problem is they'll all cost a bomb. So
probably you're going to need 35 million, not 10 million.
I'm going to keep track of them, because when we make a side for this podcast next year, we're going to have to spend hours arguing about which ones we want. So it's going to be great. I've been tasked with looking at Freo, and if I started with the biggest letdown, it's almost the whole side. I was flicking through earlier today, and they have a heap of blokes who have lost money this year, and that probably sort of sums up why they've dropped off like they have. Their MVPs are racing too. They're pretty much the only two blokes who you can consistently rely on to score points, and that's Luke Ryan, who's averaging currently 113, and Caleb Sarong 111. Those two have been pretty consistent. They haven't really let us down. A lot of people would have had Sean Darcy. He's well and truly up down. You'll get 150 one week and 50 the next. A lot of people would have backed Andrew Brayshaw. He's the biggest letdown because went with him all year. Was averaging 112 last year, only 104. He's dropped off. He hasn't been too bad of late, but considering where we expected Freo to go, where we expected him to keep going, it's been a real surprise and a letdown. Other letdowns, a lot of people went with the guy Nathan Fyfe at the start of the season, and a lot of them went with him again, I reckon. I don't know, after about round 8 and round 12. There's been a few times this year where people go, oh, it's time for Fyfe. He's lost $500 for the year. So he's played exactly where he's meant to be, which is not very much. So, and then for next year, would there be any locks? Probably not. I mean, you can probably end up finding three or four defenders who are primos that you start with. Luke Ryan may be in those. He may be not. He's definitely not a lock. He's about the only one I would consider, though, remotely. One bloke we talked about last week to watch for is my man. I'm calling him my man now because when he eventually takes the comp on by fire, I'm going to say I said it first, and that's Liam Henry. He's just his last 5 or 6 weeks, his points have gone up heaps. He's only averaging 88 for his 5-round average. That's a lot higher than he was previously. He's getting 20-plus possessions now. He just needs to actually turn that into some score assists and hitting the scoreboard himself. He just floats about on the wing, but he has some potential in an otherwise SuperCoach canyon of rubbish, we should say. So there's my quick assessment of Freo. Good luck to them. I hope I'm wrong and a couple of those blokes do well next year. Mike, any other Freo advice?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't end up going with him at the start of the year, but I had a really good look at him after his second half of 2022 form, and that was Hayden Young off the halfback flank. Gets a lot of the ball, really, really good user, and I expected him. I'm pretty glad I didn't take him in the end. Yes, he's injured at the moment, and he's played 16 games, but only averaging 91. So, look, Freo have been a huge disappointment, which I'm not all that upset about being a West Coast boy, but if you look at a quick glance of their side, other than those 4 you've mentioned averaging over 100, they've got 3 who averaged 90 nearly on the nose, and then it drops away. So they're not getting the ball, or if they're getting the ball, they're not doing anything with it. And so if you've only got 7 players who average 90 and above, I think that probably speaks volumes as to where they're sitting as a side.
Yeah, I remember after the first round on the podcast, we talked about Freo's defence. We're like, can you have Ryan and Young? And you reeled off another one. Who was the third one, Dan? And we're like, could you even have all 3?
I think it was Brendan Cox. He did 2 games and then he dropped way away.
Can you have them all? And yes.
Yeah, you'd be well. Look, let's be honest. We'll probably be in the same position we are now. So, Will Brodie last year he was
Yes.
There
an
you go.
absolute sensation. Where's he gone? What's he doing? 41,000 dropped 113,000 K. Oh, sorry, $113,000. Averaging 71 for this year. That is a massive drop off. 30 something points. I swear he was averaging around 100 last year. Massive drop. I agree. Hayden Young's the one to look at. Jordan Clark. I thought he was worth a shout. He's averaging 80. Last 3 rounds, he's averaged 92. Like we were sort of saying, those are the players that you might look at if you want to have a sort of gamble on those ones that you think might take it to the next step the next year. But I don't know. They're just too inconsistent. There's a half a dozen of those same sort of players that have pulled out good scores from time to time and look like they should be doing a lot better than they have. But yeah, it's pretty miserable looking for Freo.
Yeah, well, that wraps up Freo Bulldog Hawthorn watch. Locks for next year: Sicily, Bont, English. Maybe that's about it for now. 3 a week. We're going to be have a good side by next year, that's for sure. Keep an eye out for next week when we go through 3 more sides that are just as exciting to go through. We'll go to your rage trade for the week, Dan. I know we're not actually trading these people anymore, but if you had them, and if people had them and they still had trades and like to rage trade, who would they kick out? Who you got for us this week?
Yeah, so look, put me on. I know that this is my segment, but put me on the spot because I haven't really had that much of a thought about it. I've got 6 trades left. I'm absolutely stuffed, so I'm just hanging on for dear life in my team. But if I had them, you know what? I would go to the drawing board and I would get rid of almost every single Don because that was an insipid performance against the Cats. I brought in Darcy Parish below 100. We're talking about it. Zach Merritt, not great in his 200th. Then he got cheered off like some sort of champion. Just look, pick one of them. Pick one of them and get rid of them. Redmond, I think, did absolutely nothing. Pick any of them. Rage trade them all. Not that biased either, being a Carlton supporter, but just
we're gonna
any Essendon player.
Stick the boot in with Mick not here.
Yeah, that's it.
We'll get him to watch the recording.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this would be the test to see if he actually has watched. Yeah.
Nice one.
That's all I
We'll
got.
leave it there.
Honestly.
Cool. The rage track corner is running. The flame on that picture is slowly distinguishing, I reckon, mate. Get upgrade. Get one of your students at school to draw a new picture for next year, I reckon. All right, last bit.
They should Photoshop me to be angry.
That'd be very good. Actually, very good.
I'll open that up. All right. I'll write it down for next year.
Sweet. Well, so our last thing, as we always do, any advice coming up to round 19 and our captain/vice captain choices. Mike, I'll start with you. Who are you thinking and why? The Bulldogs play Friday night, so the conversation might be very short-lived.
Yeah, I think after last week, I think Phillips only got a week, didn't he, from his suspension, which that would have been a definite lock for VC if they had both of those of their ruckman out. But even against Phillips, who I don't rate, I got to go English as the VC. But there are some options. I mean, Carlton plays fairly early against the Witches' Hats. If you got Charlie Curnow, he could get 300 points to put as your VC. All the other ones, like the Brisbane, Geelong, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Port Adelaide, Collingwood, they're 3 really, I reckon they're flip of the coin jobs for most of those games. So how much can you really predict the likes of a Dacos, a Dawson, a Laird away from home, these types of guys really scoring big? So I think it's going to come on Friday night, possibly even at Taranto on Saturday for me.
Dan, what about you, mate? Captain, vice captain, advice for those out there for this week?
Yeah, look, I agree. We just spent a fair bit of time talking about some really high scoring Bulldogs. They play the first game. That's I think the VC option. It's against the Dons. The Dons play quite well at Marvel, and Look, I tell you what, if they've got any ounce of go in them, they will turn up on Friday at Marvel to play in that game, because far out that was pretty pathetic, especially when lots of their supporters had taken the lid off and lost it after the previous couple of weeks. So yeah, look, I'd have to go one of the Bulldogs in that Friday night games of VC. I hope against hope that Ken Hinkley, if you're listening, tag Nick Dacos. Just tag him. Like, someone has to do it eventually. I think both times he's had down games, the other teams come close to winning. Just tag him. And you're right. I think Adelaide, Melbourne is a very interesting one. Back at the MCG, Adelaide, after I think the last time they were at the MCG, it was Collingwood, where they almost got it over the line. So they could do it. There's nothing stopping them. If you're needing a win, maybe look later on in the week for your captain, if you can loophole, if that vice captain doesn't turn up. But I think there's quite a few good games early on in the week.
Yeah, there's not too many games where Bont and English both score, not much. So if you've got both and you pick the right one, you set them to get Thursday. Agree with you, Mike. Essendon's ruck stocks, not flat flash. Reece Stanley even looked good last week. I note that Rowan Marshall will be rucking against your Tristan Cherry, who we talked up last week. I believe that was you, Dan. He did get 75. My man, in our competition, we were giving last week, Mike, we gave 3 randoms who were no good, and we'd have to see who got the most. And my boy Liam Henry got 81. Just pipped the Tristan's Cherry 75. I think Mick had Boke, who got about 68 or something. So we didn't provide much advice for the fans out there. But Rowan Marshall.
I think.
What?
I think based on points per dollar, I think Cherry gets him.
Oh. But Rowan Marshall has 150 one week and 40 the next, it feels like. So stunk it up against Gold Coast, up against Cherry. I'm tempted just to roll the dice and go him in the last game of the round if my Bulldogs don't come through for me. Yeah, I'm always loath to pick stars when they're playing other stars in the midfield that I've also got. So when you've got Butters and Rosie going up against Dacos, that sometimes puts me off. But just go with the Bulldog on the Friday night, and you should be all right, I reckon.
Will Butters play? He was a little bit lame at the end of the Carlton game.
Yes, that's by the time this probably gets out there, you will probably know. That's the beauty of recording on a Monday night. So yes, keep an eye on that one for sure. Anything else, boys? Otherwise, that's it for a week. Anything to add?
No, just good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Good luck to all of us.
We're 2 weeks from SuperCoach finals, so normally that would be like super exciting. But alas, we will pretend we're dominating in a couple of weeks so we can provide some decent advice for people. In finals time, best of luck to all the SuperCoach fans out there. Check out the Inner Sanctum's website, and we'll see you again next week. Cheers, boys.